Hey, so how's it going? Here is introduction to Prewriting 3. So what are you supposed to be doing with Prewriting 3? Here we go. So at this point, are you feeling like this? If you've been thinking through your ads, reading through these readings, and you have some feeling like this, then that's the way it's supposed to work. This is definitely an intellectually hard essay. It's an essay which you have to really kind of just always push yourself to go further, not just say, oh, I see this, but what does it mean? What does it say? How does that fit into the bigger context of the world? All of that stuff. So at this point, good job if you feel that way. And it's time to stop and take a breath. And so this final pre-writing is really about of course, as we've done with all of them, saying, how does this whole thing work together? And so the first part of that is thinking about, how this writing often does seem confusing. And so anytime that you do this kind of writing, whether it's, you're not necessarily likely to do a lot of ad analysis, but you will be doing deeper analysis. And it is about flexing your brain and your muscles. And so the more you do that, the better you'll get at it. It will always, um, be challenging. It should, but you'll be better at seeing deeper, more deeply. And that's really key to your college education because, you know, this isn't about your becoming an English major. I've already told you don't do that, right? If you're going to, that's okay. But it's about your learning to, and I've mentioned before in the class that any fifth grader, really smart, determined one, could learn almost everything you need to know for your field. They can learn the facts. They can memorize things. But the critical ability, the ability to look at those facts and say, what do these mean beyond just here's fact one, here's fact two, here's fact three, but what do these mean in the bigger picture? That's what analysis does, and that's what you're really learning to do here. So we're doing it with advertisements, but you're learning, you're exercising your brain to learn to do that on a bigger scale. So keep that in mind as you go forward in the future and do more writing of this kind. So at this point, you've done a lot of reading. It's time to slow down and put it together. So to do that, we need to go back to the basic structure for the argument essay. So remember, your introduction is going to set the context. Just discuss that topic or situation. Get people in there. It's going to name the ad and the product or company, and it's going to provide your thesis. Explain what the ad reveals about contemporary culture, values, goals, acceptable roles in society, etc. And again, remember, I can't give everything because everybody's got an approach, right? It may be kind of how your technique reveals, how some technique reveals doing this, right? How that, appeal to emotion is used, or that kind of sense of, you know, this is kind of what everybody's family is like, that the way we should be, anything like that. So those are the key things that are going to happen in any kind of analysis. And when we look at our sample essays, we can see that happening in each one of them. So that, advertising is one of the most significant marketing tools. That gets us in there. She's talking about advertising. Here with Christians, we all know that advertisement's the best method to sell or introduce any product. With Louisa's, with the invention of television comes advertising. You can do that. You can think about, for example, in mine, about the Energizer battery one, I started out with, instead of that, we're all born into a world for a wonder. As we grow, we wonder. This wonder is part of our basic education before we even step into school. We wonder why the sky is blue. We ask where the rain comes from. We want to know who turns on the light. Part of exploring our world is exploring one another. There comes a point in everyone's life where we realize we're not the same. Some of us have brown skin and some tan. Some of us green eyes and some brown. Some of us have penises and some vaginas. The natural curiosity is at the center of the never let their toys die. Boom, there's get people into it. And then here's the ad and the company. Here with oh, this is Jim. I'm sorry, Jim, not Lisa. With Jim, he's not talking about the specific company, but he's talking about the way that advertisers have really stereotyped, used stereotypes of women. And so here, the movement from overt sexism to veiled sexism becomes clear in a comparison of commercials. So there, he's not necessarily, his thesis isn't necessarily this company does this, right? Because he's looking at advertising in general, but he is saying this stereotype exists this way. And so that is his thesis. Same thing, you look at Christian, here, she tells us that where's it at? Oh, Felix condoms. So we've got the company. They're saying it will these take care of these poor financial states, and then here's what she says. What is it doing? The integrity of young people and the values of men are being stepped on, and through the advertisement, the message that material things are more valuable than family, and men are more interested in material things is being sold. And then here is Louisa's, where she starts out with advertising, and she's got the Burger King, and so she's looking at what is Burger King selling, and here she says the average family in the United States experiences a much busier and hectic lifestyle than that of their parents due to the economy, an increased desire to have more in our life for our family of children, and a push to attend to fitness and wellness. A close examination of 3 advertisements by the Burger King Corporation illustrates how Burger King appeals to those circumstances and desires to appeal to consumers. So in each of those cases, it's getting it in there, naming the ad and the product or company, or in the case of Jim's, talking about that specific technique, that stereotype, and then that thesis. What is being sold? So what is that key idea underneath that's being sold? For Jim, it's this idea that, they're not being sexist, but really they are, right? We're progressive, but it's done in this kind of backhanded sexist way. In mine, I'm saying, this kind of idea that they're selling through fear. They're selling this idea that we should protect kids from what's natural, right? We grow up and we are like, wow, we're different, right? We notice these things, and that's part of natural child development. With Christians, the idea that men are just going to be all about just having sex, and they don't care about having a family, this or that kind of idea. They're just about money. And then with Louisa's, this idea that Burger King is getting us to eat this food by selling these ideas of, family togetherness, of frugality, of the busy lifestyle. So it's not about the product. It's not about the burgers. I mean, if you watched that video, you heard where I talked about where Lisa went off, and she was kind enough to share her essay, at the point where it's still, we would have edited it down some more, or the final, but how she starts to go off on the burger itself, and no, that's not it, right? The main point is, how are they selling it to us, right? That it's this idea of we're buying into that idea of family, or of, the escape, or of all those things, that we're buying into this idea of men being just, uncaring, and just, I'm just worried about having a house and a car and all that. We're buying into those things, right? It doesn't mean we are. I mean, you and I are. But, that it's this kind of cells of that. So that's our thesis, right? And that's where, that's the key thing, is digging deeper there. And then in the body, you're going to make sure and describe the ad so your readers can see it in their minds, okay? So in essay 2 with the story, when the whole class is reading a story, we wouldn't retell it, because we've all read it, right? And so I would have said, look, don't retell the story, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to say, you remember that part where, right? But when you're writing about something where, you've got the whole world to choose from of whatever that topic is, then you want to make sure your readers get it. So you're going to describe. So we already described in essay 1. You've got that. You've got a handle on that. That's your pre-writing 1. So that really, if you're just doing one ad, which is really focus on one, is kind of, you can do more than one, and Jim's is a good example, and Louisa's as well. That's why I have those there. So read those. Go back and read those again, or if you're just doing one, read an example of another one. But in that, you want that description clear. Now, if the description is the whole essay, boom, I'm not going to be able to put check marks on the rest of the stuff in the rubric, in the grade sheet. So don't make it be the whole essay, but you want to give people that overall view. So look at your description you did in pre-writing 1. See what else you can add to it. If it's really long, you may need to cut it down if you've got one of those really long narrative commercials, one of those Nike ones or something like that, okay? But you're going to have that description, and that way, when you say the part when, people are on track with you. And then in the body, and this is just what you're going to repeat over and over, what's one main reason you have for believing your thesis? That's going to be your topic sentence. What's an example of the ad that supports it? Analyze it based on the instructions we've read and interpret using your ideas, but also bringing in quotes. So let's look at so here I have my description, okay, and you can see too in, with Jim's, and when we went through this, we talked about how he does description and then he does some analysis. And the first one, not so much because it's really kind of example, but Christian, again, description, that paragraph is her description, and then she'll go into analysis, saying that LFDs are a more serious issue than STDs creates a confusing message. Main point. Young adults have already been thought of as immature, irresponsible, and thoughtless. And this is main point and specific part of the ad, okay? And so then she says, in reality, young adults, for the most part, are very concerned about getting sexually transmitted diseases and, as a rule, responsible. And then how does the ad do this, right? What is it creating in terms of this image of young people? With Louisa's, she gives, because she has different ones, we've got basically mini analysis for each one. So here, this is a typical Burger King restaurant, and we see an average family enjoying a meal. It gets our attention with the targets our sense of family by showing us how happy the family is sharing a meal together, and that they're often used in advertisements to entice consumers to come share the experience of a family meal of good food fast. For the mother, it's escape. And so here, from the kitchen at home. And how many of you have? I mean, I know I have before. It said, let's go eat because I didn't want to cook and clean, right? She brings that up. But then Fowles is where she read about that escape. And so she gives the quote. Many advertisers like to appealing to the need for escape because the sensation of pleasure often accompanies escape. And what nice emotional nimbus could there be for a product? And then she gives the citation. So Fowles, and boom, remember, once we give somebody's name, we're going to have that date right after it, okay? And then here's the location. So we've got author, date, location. And then she says, then it's bigger. When we see an advertisement for a fast food product like Burger King's hamburger, we find it appeals to our senses. This is done not only through taste and sight, but also our emotions for leaving the hot kitchen and dishes behind. This is a perfect example of what Fowles means when he says that advertisers like to appeal to our feeling of escape. So this is like a wonderful paragraph to look at and model yours after. And you can look at it and model, use your own words, your own ideas, okay? But, she starts with that kind of, here's the main point, right? And if she's doing more than one, but if you're just doing one, then you're going to look at a certain part, as Christian does with, when they're like making fun of sexually transmitted disease with these lifetime financial, whatever they are. So when they're making fun of that, what are they really kind of saying about younger people? And so you start with kind of what is your main point? And actually the best way to write it, maybe to write that evidence in first, right? What is that main point? So that what part of the description where you're talking about it here, Louisa, the advertisement gets our attention by doing this, right? Showing us the colors and family. And then, boom, Fowles said this. So she's got, here's how the advertisement gets our attention. And here's some of the research I'm using, right? This dude talks about escape and, okay, and then, so what, right? What does that mean? She gives us 2-3 sentences there that says, look, this image of this just place away and where the family's having a good time, and this idea, it becomes this idea of escape, and this is how it works for us. So if you write that kind of evidence and then kind of what does it mean, how does it fit into an overall idea, then you can read that and just go back and then just put in a topic sentence. Say, how would I kind of sum this up, lead people into it with one sentence to get them in there? That's really what I suggest you do there. And so that's that building that body. And you repeat this until you finish discussing the points you made. Really, you're going to need to do at least, maybe 2 longer ones, 3, maybe 4. So these are your body paragraphs. You'll have your description and that. and then bring it all together. And that's where you just go and say, okay, big deal. So what? In the end, why does it matter? And one of the things I really suggest you do is just write it, write the body and go through and read that and then set it aside, take a break, go for a walk, whatever, walk the dog, and then just sit down and say, okay, so what do I think? What's the big deal? So what is not just this ad? Yeah, what's this ad overall saying between the lines? But why does that matter, right? Why is it good? Why is it bad? How do we see? Is it just kind of something that is just, this is one ad and there are others that do that? Does it happen in TV too, on the internet? This idea of like ads that show perfect kitchens. That's what gets me, right? Because the kitchens I've grown up in, my kitchen, they're not these perfect, like manicured places. They're kitchens, right? They're where we live. They're like the heart of the house, and they're real. And so, like a lot of times on TV, it's these really fancy ones that I'm like, yeah, I know those exist out there somewhere, but they're kind of made to seem like it's like the everyday person's kitchen. And I'm like, no. So how does that kind of create this idea of who we should be, whether it's for kids or for us? This idea of thinking, oh, I'll be a success when I reach that. So that's where that's at. Here, look, you can say, Jim says these suggestive commercials show the way society often sees women. And then he talks about the regression of it from, the 60s, but says, look, if we look, we can still see that there's still this kind of stereotyping in the media. Davis states we consciously transcend the age of communication and stop blindly accepting the myths of the image culture. As a society, we have to be increasingly vigilant. And so here Jim's making his statement. He's saying, look, we need to really look at this. These subtle forms of stereotyping go beyond gender and are often so indirect we don't notice them consciously. However, with multiple streams of media creating images of what people should be like based on gender, race, ethnicity, and any other kind of difference, we're all susceptible to falling into those roles, but more dangerously dealing with others based on the stereotypes we've subconsciously taken in. So in the end, that's what he's saying is the big deal about ads like this. Not that it's one ad here, there, whatever, but that we just really don't think about it and we start to, see people that way. With Christian, looking at how young people are seen, definitely this, they fight against a number of negative stereotypes these days. The idea that they're irresponsible is one of the most prevalent, closely followed by the idea that they're only concerned with partying and having fun. And then more than that, men are cast as uncaring and selfish throughout the media. The examples of this in the Felix ad parody those images, and in doing so make very relevant points. Our ideas of young people, and men specifically, are views that disrespect their integrity and values. In Idols of the Marketplace, Kavanaugh, boom, writes, if we asked ourselves what values we'd like to see illuminating the lives of our children, students, parishioners, and co-religionists, I think designer jeans would fall pretty far down the list. After a close analysis of this advertisement, it's easy to see that Felix with condoms would fall pretty far down the list as well. So her bigger point there isn't just that, that this is that funny commercial or whatever, but really, what she's carried all the way through is that it is really one more commercial that just makes people kind of look at young people and say, oh, they're irresponsible, they're immature, they just want to party and have fun. And that's generational. That you go back to the Greeks, and literally they were saying that. But I think we do have to make sure that, and it goes both ways, right? When you look at like stereotypes of older people, oh my God, those are horrible. So yeah, it goes every way, and that's one of the things as humans we have to constantly fight against. Is not just being able to look and say, oh, they're that, and that's it, right? And just writing each other off because we're this or we're that, whatever, right? So we're somebody who says right all the time. Whatever it is. Anyway, I was about to say that word again. And then in Louisa's, when she brings it together, she says, look, by using all of these, different kinds of ads, what they do is they're creating this appeal to all of these things, the convenience of escape, thinking the food is healthy by that appearance, and then, instead of being, oh, it's but it contributes to the health problems of the country. Don't make it convenient, right? That they're also kind of appealing to convenience. And says its message of escape does not guarantee quality time with the family. Instead of being simply false or superstitious ideas, Davis points out that these kinds of myths and images are ideas and stories that motivate daily behavior, and Burger King plays into these, creating myths about family health and escape in the setting of our fast-paced lives. And so there she's just saying, so what's the deal with that, right? I mean, how it is this idea that, oh, you take the kids to Burger King and yeah, they're going to be happy, you're going to be happy, it's all going to be great. Yeah, it might be fun, but it's not like this solution to a happy family. Or when we see that and we can't afford that, like I remember, scratching for that change in the couch to buy diapers, and seeing things on TV where moms were doing things with their kids or with their babies and this and that, and really feeling crappy because I couldn't afford to do that, and thinking, oh, I'm not good enough. Well, did that stuff make me a better mom or a worse mom? It wasn't. It was stuff. you know and so those kinds of things really do kind of affect how we see ourselves, how we see others. We judge by them, or how we think about what we should do, like what should you do to be a good mom or a good dad or a good son or daughter, or or whatever it is. And so that's the bigger issue there, and that's where we're going with the conclusion. So you want to really kind of keep those parts in mind. And remember, go to the Essay 3 webpage, and there's all these samples. And so if you're working on the, introduction, just open 2, 3, 4 and just go through and just read introductions, right? Just read that first paragraph, first paragraph, first paragraph, first paragraph, and then sit down and write yours, right? You're working on the description. Go through and read the description, the description, the description, right? And work on yours. Now, your references page, you've got to make sure and cite. Remember that you'll have to cite the ad or ads you use. So like with Louisa, she had 3 Burger King ads, so she needs to cite them all. And then you have to use at least 2 things from our readings. I really do not want you going off track and using other stuff, okay? So, as I talked about in going through Louisa's paper, she was gracious enough. She's like, oh yeah, share this because people need to know how you can go off track. Remember, it's not about, she got off track by going, kind of left field in terms of talking about nutrition, which was her field, but we want to stay with the ad. Right? In Jim's, Christian's, she had the Felix condom ad, and then she quoted from Kavanaugh and Kilborn, so the idols of the marketplace, and Jesus is the brand of jeans. And notice K-A, K-I-P, these are alphabetical order. Notice this is that hanging indent, no bullets, none of that stuff, okay? And then here's Jim, where he had the Dodge commercial, he had the gold medal flower, he had the Oldsmobile, and then he cited from Fowles and from Davis, okay? So remember, with your sources, you've got to have at least one ad, because you've got to be doing at least one ad. I did the Energizer one, all right? And then I used the New Mexico Literary Project, The Language of Persuasion, and then Lopez, the Lopez work, and then Fowles. And so F-L-E. Oh, look what I did. I don't know. If I were grading this, I'd be like, what? You don't know your ABCs, Kelly? Oh my gosh, A, B, C, D, E, F. That should be first. Don't know how that happened, so double check it. Don't do like I did, okay? And make sure, of course, that's part of your paper, right? That this should be your, next page there, all right? You may find some allusions to abstracts. I didn't, I'm not sure if I've got that cleaned up or not, because anymore APA has gone to not requiring abstracts for student papers. I do teach it. If you want to give one a try, I'll give you up to 5 points for giving it a try. There are 3. Make sure you look at the samples. There are 3 different samples with abstracts. That abstract is that summary that you would write after you wrote your essay. Okay, and you say this paper takes a look, not will do it. It already did it. You've already written it, that kind of thing. It's kind of a weird kind of writing. So read through all 3 of these. Read them out loud. It will help you get the feel for that. Like here, we have, I will point out, you can do that there. Remember, in the essay itself, no I, me, my, no you, yours. The I, me, my, I think, just drop it, right? If you're giving personal stories, not when I was, young and was raising my son, I would look at TV and feel bad. Many young mothers or young parents may raise their children and, when they look at TV, feel bad because they can't provide all the material things that are shown on TV and associated with being a good mother. However, we have to ask ourselves, is that really good parenting? See, yeah, that was my experience, but I took the I out and I just made it general, okay? The you, when you do this, no, who do you mean? When mothers do this, when children do this, when sports figures do this, who is that you? So in the essay, remember, none of that personal pronouns. You can use we. You can do it though in this abstract, and then you have keywords. And keywords, everybody should have media analysis, advertising, whatever the company is, and then like what different appeals or things like that are you talking about? Here, look, fear, happiness, emotional transfer. So those keywords, and notice they're just skip just like one extra line there. Emotions, holidays, they're just the obvious stuff, okay? So if you want to do the abstract, it's extra credit. Now, here's what you're going to do. Ideas for your introduction. So if you go through and fill out, and when we look at, wait, I need to go back to our schedule. When you fill out this form, okay, it's on the pre-writing page. So you go to pre-writing 3, okay? And then here is this. Open this attachment form and copy the parts below the line. Paste it into your journal response. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to save it. So let me put this in my right there. Save. Okay. And then open it up. It's RTF. It should open up in Word or whatever. And just copy all of this. Just go through and go. Well, let's see how it copies. Let's make sure it did it right. Okay, I mean, you don't have to copy all that right there. Okay, here we go. And then we're going to go over here, create a journal entry. Okay, and then just pre-writing 3, whatever you want to put, and boom. And of course, you can type it in Word if you want. Okay, and so you could go in and do this in Word and then just copy it. So what's the product company ad you're writing about? Energizer. Never let their toys die. That's the ad. Right. So just go in there and then you can type in your things here. And this just actually walks you through all those things that are happening in the essay, what we just went through. Okay. Now the key thing to remember though, and so you may want to do this in Word, or you could paste this into Google Docs, whatever it is you're using, and then once you're done typing it up, just make sure you paste it into your journal. But really, start wherever you have ideas. Don't feel like you have to start up here. I mean, yes, you should be able to fill out this part first, okay? What's your main topic, some general ideas. That you can wait on, okay? But what I would say is start in here, okay? So evidence, what's one point? So once you are able to say, this one, you might start here with thesis, right? What is being sold between the lines? What does it reveal about contemporary culture, value, goals, right? Write it out in one complete sentence. So now that you have looked at this ad and you've thought about different things and we've read these readings, what is it selling between the lines? Write that out. Answer that question in that thesis space, right? How is it selling it, right? Is it using fear to do that? Is it using the need for escape to do that, right? Write that out. Just write that out in that thesis space, and that gives you your thesis. And then drop down to the evidence parts, and then you can say, okay, what's one part from the ad that made me think this? Oh, okay, that part where? And then you put, at one point in the ad, what happened, right? Someone says, or it shows this. And then how is that an example of that, right? So Christian says, when the guy says you could buy all these things without having to pay child support. And then what does that show? Well, it shows that they're painting this picture of men as just really materialistic and valuing cars and, houses more than they do having a kid, which, by the way, remember, it's great. If you don't want to have kids, don't have kids, right? I mean, too many people in this world have kids like they have weeds in their yard. So make your choices. It's a good thing. Just make a choice, okay? But then you could do that, and then you read this and say, okay, how would I start this out? What's this topic sentence here? Boom. That's a rough draft of a paragraph for your paper. Do the same thing. What's another moment that, shows me this, right? And then boom, what does it show, right? So give that example, specific example. At another time in the ad, the guy says blah, blah, blah. Or when we look at the text on this Energizer ad, you can see it says never let their toys die, and it's in red, right? Boom, what does that mean? Well, using that red is like always a warning or something we should fear and be aware of. So just that color creates that. But then that never let their toys die is almost this threat. And so you can look at my sample and see where I talk about that. And then I give you some ideas for your conclusion. So just type up that stuff here. Now you got to figure out, because in each of these, it's like, okay, where are there places? And some of the easiest places to get quotes in are in the introduction, and then also in the conclusion, because there you can think about the big ideas. But it also works in the paper, because if you're talking about fear, if you're talking about that emotional transmission or anything like that, right? Any of those things, then those are the kinds of things that appeal short list, there we go, that you can quote from, because those were in our reading. So go back to this short list, and I'll put the link in the description, okay? And think about, what are you talking about, and then go back to where it's talked about in the reading. Use that quote in there. So really, that's how this works. And then, of course, once you do that, once you fill in those spaces, you can either fill it in here on Blackboard or fill it in there. Go ahead and boom, just post entry, but make sure that you copy what you wrote out, because this gives you a rough draft of your essay, okay? Once you have that, then it's just about saying, okay, this is the real rough skeleton draft. Let me just put the whole thing together, okay? Because that's where we're at. Let's take a look at that real quick. So, you'll have that rough draft there. And that's your pre-writing 3. And by that point, your pre-writing 1 is your pre-writing 1 is your what do you call it? Your description, right? So you can go back to that, edit that. Your pre-writing 2 helped you kind of decide and focus on what to talk about. And of course, you can change your mind in pre-writing 3. Your pre-writing 3 is that whole outline of your essay in general. So once you do that and you fill that out, you really have your basics for your paper. So take a moment, breathe, download the form, right? Fill it out wherever you want, so you can, if you save it, and if you're using Google Docs, you can open it up there, or Word, whatever you're using. I would say go ahead and fill it out there. That way you can save it, because you can just take out all my words, and then you have a rough draft. It's not pretty. It's not perfect. You will still need to work on it, but we'll give you a rough draft of your essay, okay? Plus a 100 for pre-writing. Cool? So, anyway, that's all I got for you. Trust the process. Just do it. Like I said, you don't have to start from the first. The only thing you really kind of need to know, well, you could start with all your evidence and then look at all your evidence and what you think about it and say, how would I sum this up in one sentence? And then go write that down as your thesis. Just make sure it matches our goal for this paper. Or you could start with your thesis, answer that question, and then go through and put your evidence in, and then right under that, what does that evidence show, your discussion, boom, boom, and then put in those topic sentences. And that does give you, once you add in your description, and then you say, okay, let me make sure I'm using some stuff from our sources. And remember, either quote things you agree with that you read and you're like, yeah, dude, I totally see that in my essay, because then you can say, according to Kavanaugh, blah, blah, blah. If we look at this ad, you can see it here, or those things you disagree with. No, that's crazy, right? When Lopez says, blah, 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 he makes a point. However, it's very different, right? We can see it different, and then you can use the example from your ad and explain how it's different. So remember, quotes are really great for, big ideas, like kind of overall philosophy, but then also, if you're talking about specific techniques, so you can say Fowles explains, or Lopez explains, that emotional transfer happens when blah, and then you can say, here it is in the ad. Or if you read anything you disagree with, because the minute we read something we disagree with, we're like, boom, 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 let me tell you why. And that's words you can put in an essay. So there you go. That's pre-writing 3. It gives you down and dirty rough draft. And then your job is, of course, to just shape that a little bit more. So, whatever you do, make sure and breathe. This too shall pass, right? So, take care. Let me know what questions you have.